Crash and shock, the night sky tore apart with fire. A silver ship fell down like a burning star, its body breaking into pieces as it crashed through the atmosphere of an unknown planet. The sound was like thunder, rolling across the dark alien. Jungle, trees shook, birds of strange colors screamed, and the ground trembled. When the dust cleared, only wreckage remained. The one-sprawed ship lay broken, half buried in the soft red soil. Smoke rose in long black fingers, reaching up to the alien sky. Among the wreck, two figures moved to survivors. The first was a man, a human engineer named Daniel. His suit was torn, his face covered with blood and dirt. He pulled himself out from a broken panel, coughing hard, trying to catch his breath. His body ached with pain, but his mind was clear. He knew one truth: he was alive. The second survivor was not. Human. She was tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her silver eyes reflected the fire around her, and her long hair moved like liquid in the warm wind. She was an alien, a soldier from a distant star. Her name was Araya. Daniel froze when he saw her. His first thought was fear. He had heard of her kind before. Their empires had clashed in battles across the stars. They were enemies. But now she was here, standing in the wreckage with him, her weapon broken and her armor cracked. She looked just as lost as he was. For a long moment, they only stared at each other. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hiss of burning metal. Neither spoke, neither trusted the other. But the silence did not last. A low sound came from the jungle. It was deep, like a growl. Something was out there, moving between the glowing plants. Daniel looked around, his heart beating faster. Araya turned her head, her silver eyes narrowing. "We are not alone," she said in a calm but sharp voice. Daniel swallowed. His hand reached for a tool at his belt, a simple metal rod. It was no weapon, but it was better than nothing. He forced himself to stand, even as his legs shook. The jungle around them was alive with strange sounds. Insects buzzed with metallic wings. Plants opened like mouths, releasing glowing spores into the air. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped in a slow rhythm, echoing in the silence. And then, again, the growl. Closer this time, Araya stepped forward, placing herself between Daniel and the sound. Her armor was broken, but she still moved like a warrior. She lifted a shard of metal from the ground, sharp and long, and held it in her hands like a blade. Daniel wanted to protest. She was alien, his enemy. But a stronger voice inside him said, "Not now. Survival comes first." Together, they stood at the edge of the wreck, waiting. The smoke behind them made it hard to see, and the jungle ahead was thick with shadows. Something rustled in the leaves. A branch snapped. The growl became a roar, loud and terrible, shaking Daniel's chest. But then, silence. The sound stopped. As suddenly as it came, the jungle grew quiet again. Too quiet. Daniel looked at Araya, his voice low. What was that? Her silver eyes never left the trees. "A hunter," she said. "Something that wants us." Fear tightened his chest. This was no ordinary world. This was a predator's world. The two survivors pulled back into the wreckage, away from the open jungle. They needed fire. They needed light. They needed a plan. Daniel began to gather broken panels, trying to make a small wall. His hands shook, but his engineer's mind focused on the task. Araya watched him for a moment, then joined him. She said nothing, but her actions spoke. For now, they would work together. Minutes passed. The fire from the ship gave them light, but it also gave them fear. Light meant safety, but it also meant they could be seen. Every sound in the jungle made them jump. Every shadow looked like death waiting to strike as the night grew darker. Daniel sat down against the wreck. His body was weak, his eyes heavy, but he forced himself to stay awake. Beside him, Araya sat as still as stone, her eyes scanning the jungle. She was a soldier. He was only an engineer. But tonight, they were the same two souls caught in a deadly place. Above them, the sky was strange. Two moons hung side by side, casting a ghostly light on the ruins of their ship. The stars looked different here, far from home. There was no rescue coming. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Daniel took a slow breath, trying to push away his fear. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "We have to survive." Araya turned her head, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. She said nothing, but her silence was agreement. Far away, deep in the jungle, the growl came again. This time, it was not alone. Uneasy alliance, the long night passed slowly. The jungle never slept. Strange lights moved between the trees, glowing. Insects whispered like voices, and the sound of distant roars kept Daniel awake. When the pale morning came, the crash site looked even worse. The ship was dead. Panels were scattered like broken bones, wires hung like vines, and smoke still rose, in thin white lines. Daniel sat on a piece of metal, his hands black with dirt. He was tired, but his mind worked like a machine. We need water. We need food. We need to fix something before night comes again. Araya stood apart from him, tall and silent, her silver eyes scanning the jungle. Her armor had cracks across the chest, and her weapon was broken. Even so, she looked strong, dangerous. Her alien skin glowed faintly under the sunlight. She did not look weak like him. Daniel finally spoke. "We should search for supplies." The ship had emergency packs. Araya turned her head slowly, her face calm but sharp. "I already looked. Most are destroyed. Your human technology burns too easily." Her words cut like a knife. Daniel bit back his anger. He wanted to argue, to remind her that without his skills, she would already be dead. But he held it in. Fighting her would be useless. Still, he could not stay quiet. "We need to work together. Alone, we won't survive." She gave a small, cold laugh. "Humans and my kind. We are not made to work together. We are enemies." Daniel stood up, his voice hard. "Enemies? Look around you. The war is not here. The only enemy is out there." He pointed at the jungle, where shadows moved between the trees. Araya said nothing, but her eyes softened just for a moment. They began to search the wreckage. Daniel pulled open broken panels, his hands careful not to cut himself. He found a small case of tools, half burned but still useful. He smiled weakly. "Good. I can build something with this." Araya raised an eyebrow. "Build? These scraps will not stop the hunters." Daniel met her eyes. "You have strength. I have knowledge. Together, maybe we stand a chance." For the first time, she did not argue. Instead, she bent down and lifted a heavy piece of metal as if it weighed nothing. She set it aside, clearing the wreck. They worked in silence, their movements awkward. Two different worlds forced into one. The silence broke when Daniel found something. Half buried under the soil, a cracked emergency ration pack. He tore it open. The food was strange. Dry blocks that tasted like sand, but it was life. He chewed slowly, then handed one to Araya. She looked at it with disgust. "Human food. Eat," Daniel said, "or starve." Her pride battled with hunger. Finally, she took it and bit down. Her expression remained cold, but she ate the whole block. Daniel almost smiled. Hours passed. The jungle grew hotter. The air was thick, hard to breathe. As they worked, Daniel noticed the carvings on a nearby stone wall. They looked old ancient symbols cut into the rock. Curiosity pulled him closer. "What is this place?" he whispered. Araya joined him, her eyes narrowing at the markings. She traced a hand over the stone. "These are not human." "Not mine either. Another race lived here." Before Daniel could ask more, the jungle answered with a sudden sound heavy. Footsteps. Both of them froze. The steps were slow, deliberate, moving closer. Daniel's heart raced. He grabbed a metal rod, his only weapon. Araya crouched low, her shard of metal ready in her hands. The footsteps stopped just beyond the trees. The air felt heavy, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. Then, nothing. Silence again. Araya's voice was low. "It is watching us." Daniel's skin went cold. Why doesn't it attack? Her eyes remained on the shadows. Because it is waiting. Testing us, they returned to the wreck, building a small barricade. Daniel tied wires, bent metal, and shaped traps the way his mind always knew how. Araya watched him work, impressed but silent. Finally, she spoke. "You are clever for a human." Daniel smirked despite the fear in his chest. "And you're not bad company. For someone who wanted me dead last night." She almost smiled. Almost, but before the bond could grow, the jungle screamed again. This time, it was louder, closer, and answered by a second roar. Daniel felt the ground shake. He looked at Araya. "There's more than one." She nodded, her silver eyes fierce. "Yes, and night will bring them all." As the sun began to fall, the two survivors sat near their small barricade. For the first time, they spoke without anger. Daniel told her about Earth, about machines and oceans and skies filled with birds. Araya told him of her home world, of towers built on floating islands and storms of violet lightning. Two enemies, sharing stories under a broken sky. Yet even as they spoke, both knew the truth. Trust was fragile. The jungle was full of eyes. And when darkness came again, the hunters would return. The planet's secret the second night was harder than the first. Daniel and Araya did not sleep. They sat inside their barricade of broken ship parts, listening to the jungle breathe around them. The hunters came close, but they did not strike. Their glowing eyes moved in the dark, circling, always watching. When morning finally arrived, it felt like a gift they did not deserve. Daniel rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him. Araya stood tall as always, though her face showed the same weariness. She looked toward the jungle where mist hung low like smoke. "This world is not empty," she said. "There is history here." Daniel followed her gaze. He remembered the strange carvings they had seen on the stone wall the day before. Curiosity burned inside him. If this planet held ruins, then maybe it also held answers, maybe even a way to survive. "We should explore," he said. Araya tilted her head, studying him. "Explore." "We are being hunted." "Yes," Daniel said firmly. "But hiding forever won't save us. If something lived here before, maybe they left tools, maybe shelter, maybe hope." For a long moment, she was silent. Then she gave a short nod. "Very well. But if you slow me down, human, I will leave you." Daniel almost smiled. Fair enough. They left the crash site behind, stepping carefully into the jungle. The ground was soft and red, covered in plants with leaves that pulsed with faint light. The air smelled sweet but heavy, like flowers mixed with smoke. Strange insect birds flew overhead, their wings humming like engines. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The jungle seemed to listen. Daniel kept his eyes on the ground, marking their path so they would not be lost. Araya moved ahead, her shard of metal in hand, her eyes scanning every shadow. Hours passed until they reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive stone structure, half buried by vines and roots. It looked like a temple, its walls carved with symbols and figures. The stone glowed faintly, as if remembering an ancient light. Daniel's breath caught. This is incredible. Araya's face was unreadable. It is old. Older than your species. Older than mine. They stepped closer, running their hands across the cold stone. The carvings showed scenes of battle, of humans and aliens, not enemies, but allies standing together against monstrous beasts. Daniel froze. His heart raced as he traced the figures with his fingers. Look at this, humans and your kind. Side by side. Araya's silver eyes narrowed. Impossible. Our people have never fought together. Maybe not in your time, Daniel whispered. But long ago, maybe we did. For a brief moment, the two of them shared the same thought. Were they? Not the first to stand on this planet. Was this place once part of a forgotten war? Before they could speak further, a sound echoed inside the temple. A low hum, soft but steady, like machinery buried deep within the stone. Araya lifted her weapon shard. Something is alive in there. Daniel's curiosity only grew. He stepped into the dark entrance. The air was cooler inside, heavy with dust. Broken statues lined the walls, their faces lost to time. In the center of the chamber stood a tall crystal, cracked but glowing faintly. Daniel touched it gently. The glow grew stronger, filling the chamber with pale blue light. Symbols lit up across the walls, forming patterns like a map. It's technology, Daniel breathed. Not just stone. Whoever lived here, they were advanced. Araya frowned, stepping closer. This crystal is not dead. It remembers. The glow pulsed, and a voice filled the room. Not words, just echoes, whispers, fragments of a language neither could understand. But the tone was urgent. Warning, like a cry carried across centuries. Daniel's skin crawled. It's trying to tell us something. Araya's eyes narrowed. Or it is trying to call something. The ground suddenly shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. A loud roar echoed outside the temple closer than before. Daniel's heart pounded. The hunters. Araya grabbed his arm and pulled him back toward the entrance. They followed us. They burst out of the temple into the clearing. The jungle moved as something massive pushed through the trees. A shadow loomed, larger than anything they had seen. Its body was covered in black scales, its eyes glowing like molten fire. It was no ordinary beast. It was a predator born of war, a weapon left behind by the ancients. Daniel froze in terror, his hands gripping his useless metal rod. Araya stood in front of him, her shard raised, her stance firm. The creature let out a roar that shook the ground. Its breath hot and foul. Birds scattered from the trees. The jungle itself seemed to tremble. Daniel whispered, "We can't fight that." Araya did not move. Her voice was steady. "Then we must run." Together they turned and fled into the jungle, the sound of the beast crashing after them, tearing trees from the ground. The chase had begun. They ran until their lungs burned, leaping over roots and crashing through vines. The beast's roars grew louder, closer, unstoppable. Finally, they stumbled back into the wreckage of their ship, falling behind their barricade. Daniel gasped for air. It followed us all this way. Araya's face was pale but calm. No, it was waiting. The temple woke it. Daniel looked back toward the jungle, his heart heavy. The ruins had given them knowledge, but they had also given birth to a new terror. Night was coming. And now the hunters knew exactly where they were. First attack the night came fast, falling like a heavy curtain over the wrecked ship. Two moons rose above the jungle, pale and cold, throwing long shadows across the broken metal. Daniel sat near the barricade, his chest rising and falling with tired breaths. Beside him, Araya crouched like a hunter, her sharp eyes fixed on the dark trees. Neither spoke. Words would not help now. They both felt it, the heavy silence before a storm, the waiting breath of predators closing in. Daniel's hands shook as he tightened the wires around his makeshift traps. He had used broken panels, sharp shards, and a little of his engineering knowledge to build what he could. Simple devices, trip lines, falling spikes, hidden pits. Not enough to stop the giant beast from the temple, but maybe enough for the smaller. Hunter's Araya checked her weapon shard, running her fingers across its jagged edge. She glanced at Daniel. When they come, do not freeze. Move, fight. Daniel gave a dry laugh, though fear twisted in his stomach. Easy for you to say. You were trained for this. I build machines, not fight monsters. Her eyes softened. Just for a moment, machines may save us more than weapons. The jungle stirred. A low growl echoed through the trees. Then another, closer. Leaves shook, branches snapped. Glowing eyes appeared in the dark, first 2, then 4, then 6. The hunters had come. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. They were smaller than the giant beast, but still terrifying. Their bodies were long and muscular, covered in scales that shimmered in the moonlight. Their mouths were filled with curved teeth, and their claws cut deep lines into the soil. The first one stepped forward, sniffing the air. The barricade glowed faintly from the fire behind it. Daniel gripped his metal rod tighter, his palms wet with sweat. Then, without warning, the creature leaped. The trap snapped. A hidden wire pulled tight, releasing a swinging panel of sharp metal. It struck the beast across the face, drawing dark blood. The creature screamed and stumbled back, its roar shaking the jungle. Daniel almost collapsed in relief. It worked. The trap worked, but there was no time to celebrate. 2 more hunters rushed forward, leaping over the barricade. Araya moved like lightning. She struck one with her shard, driving it deep into its neck. The beast fell, thrashing. The second one landed close to Daniel. He froze for half a second, terror locking his body. The creature's glowing eyes locked. Onto him, its jaws opened wide. Araya shouted, "Move." Daniel swung the metal rod with all his strength. It struck the beast's head, but only angered it. The creature roared and lunged. At the last second, one of Daniel's floor traps triggered. The ground gave way, and the hunter fell into a pit lined with spikes. Its cries filled the night until it went silent. Daniel dropped to his knees, his chest heaving. He had survived, barely, but the fight was not over. The leader appeared. Larger than the others, its back covered in spines, its roar louder than thunder. It charged the barricade with terrifying speed. The entire wall of metal shuddered, almost breaking apart. Daniel's heart stopped. Nothing I built will hold against. That, Araya stepped forward, fearless. She shouted something in her own language, a war cry that rang across the wreckage. She leaped high, her shard aimed for the beast's eye. The creature swung its massive claw, knocking her from the air. She hit the ground hard, rolling across the dirt. Her shard flew from her hand. "Araya," Daniel shouted. The beast lowered its head, ready to finish her. Daniel's mind raced. He looked at the broken reactor core lying in the wreckage. Dangerous. Unstable, but maybe their only chance. He grabbed a piece of sparking wire and jammed it into the core. The reactor screamed to life, glowing bright. "Hey!" Daniel shouted at the beast, waving his arms. "Over here!" The monster turned, its glowing eyes locking onto him. Daniel's throat went dry. "Come on, take the bait." The beast roared and charged straight at him. Daniel ran, leading. it toward the core. At the last second, he dove aside. The creature slammed into the reactor. The impact released a burst of burning energy. The explosion lit the night sky, throwing fire and smoke high above the trees. The beast screamed in pain. As flames covered its body, it stumbled, roared again, then turned and fled back into the jungle, its body burning as it disappeared into the dark. Silence fell. The other hunters, seeing their leader wounded, vanished into the shadows. The jungle grew quiet once more, leaving only the sound of crackling fire. Daniel lay on the ground, coughing from the smoke, his ears ringing, his body trembled. From exhaustion and fear, Araya crawled to him, her face pale but alive. She picked up her shard and looked at him with unreadable eyes. "You risked your life?" she said softly. Daniel laughed weakly, his voice broken. "I didn't have a choice. If that thing killed you, I'd be alone." For a moment, her eyes softened. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Not as an enemy, but as something closer to an ally. But the moment did not last. In the distance, a deeper roar rolled across the jungle, the voice of something larger, more terrible. Daniel closed his eyes. That wasn't the biggest one. Was it Araya's hand tightened on her shard? No, that was only the beginning. Growing beyond the jungle was quiet again, but the silence did not bring peace. It felt heavy, like a warning. Smoke from the burned beast still floated above the wreckage, twisting into the night sky. Daniel sat on the ground, his arms shaking, his breath ragged. Every muscle ached, but he forced himself to stay awake. Araya stood near the barricade, her shard glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her armor was torn, her blue skin marked with scratches, but she still looked unbroken, like a warrior carved from stone. She did not show weakness, yet Daniel could see it in her eyes' exhaustion, hidden beneath pride. For a long time, neither spoke. They only listened to the faint cries of distant creatures and the crackle of dying flames. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "You saved me," he said softly. Araya turned her head, her silver eyes catching the light. "And you saved me. We are even." Daniel gave a tired smile. "I think we've saved each other more than once." She did not answer, but her silence carried a truth she did not want to admit. Morning came slowly, a pale light creeping through the trees. The two survivors sat together near the wreck, eating what little food remained. The dry blocks tasted like dust, but neither complained. Survival was enough. As the sun rose higher, Daniel worked with his tools, repairing what he could. He built small traps, sharpened shards, and gathered wires. His hands moved carefully, every cut and twist of metal giving him purpose. Araya watched him for a while before speaking. "You make weapons from broken things." Daniel shrugged. "That's what I do. I fix, I build. I try to make broken things useful again." She tilted her head, studying him. "Strange. On my world, broken things are left behind. Only the strong survive." Daniel looked up at her, his eyes tired but steady. Sometimes strength isn't about leaving things behind. Sometimes it's about holding on. For a moment, her expression softened. She did not reply, but something in her gaze changed. Later, they left the wreck to search for water. The air was hot, the ground damp with mist. Strange plants reached toward them, glowing faintly as if alive. Daniel felt uneasy, but Araya walked with steady steps, her shard ready. They came to a stream running through the jungle. The water glowed faint blue under the sunlight, alive with tiny sparks like stars. Daniel crouched down, testing it carefully. "It's clean," he said. "We can drink." He filled a container, handing it to Araya. She hesitated, then drank. Her face remained calm, but her shoulders relaxed. "Good," she said simply. Daniel drank too. the cool water easing his dry throat. For a moment, the jungle seemed less hostile, less cruel. They rested by the stream. Daniel leaned back against a stone, his eyes half closed. Araya sat near him, silent as always, but not distant. After a long silence, Daniel spoke. "Tell me about your home." She looked at him with surprise. "Why?" "Because if we're stuck here," Daniel said, "I'd like to know the person I'm stuck with." For the first time, she gave a small, almost hidden smile. She looked up at the sky, her voice calm. "My world has storms of violet lightning. The air smells of iron. Towers rise above the clouds, built from crystal and steel. Our people are warriors, always ready for battle. We do not hide. We do not bend. We fight until death." Daniel listened quietly, imagining the strange, beautiful world she described. When she finished, he nodded. "Sounds terrifying and amazing." She looked at him. "And your world?" Daniel smiled faintly. "It is noisy. Busy cities, oceans full of salt water, skies filled with birds. We're not as strong as your people, but we dream big. We build. We try to reach the stars. Even if we're not always ready for what we find." Araya studied him. "You sound proud, yet you call your people weak." "Maybe weakness and strength are the same thing," Daniel said softly. "We fall, we fail, but we get back up again." For the first time, Araya laughed quietly. Not cruel, not sharp, just a small sound that felt strangely human. Their moment of peace ended with a sudden flash. From the ruins nearby, a faint red light flickered through the vines. Daniel stood quickly, his heart racing. "Do you see that?" Raya narrowed her eyes. "Yes, it is a beacon." They approached the ruins carefully. The red light pulsed in. Steady rhythm, faint but clear. It came from a broken device, half buried in stone. Daniel crouched, brushing dirt away. "This isn't from our ship. This is older." Araya's face grew tense. A signal left behind. But for whom? The beacon pulsed again, brighter now, as if awakened by their touch. Daniel's stomach twisted. If it's broadcasting, someone or something can hear it. Araya raised her shard, her eyes sharp. "Then we have already been heard." The jungle around them stirred. A distant roar rolled across the land, deeper than before. The sound made the ground tremble, shaking the stones beneath their feet. Daniel felt cold fear run through him. Not again. Araya's voice was calm but dark. "No, this is not the same creature. This is something worse." They backed away from the beacon, the red light flashing faster, brighter. The ruins seemed alive, the air heavy with power. Daniel whispered, "We shouldn't have touched it." Araya's eyes did not leave the jungle. It does not matter. The signal has already gone out. Together, they stood in silence, the bond between them stronger now, yet surrounded by growing danger. The beacon pulsed, the jungle roared, and the night prepared to bring them a new terror. The truth revealed, the red beacon did not stop flashing. It pulsed in steady rhythm, casting long shadows across the ruins. Daniel and Araya stood in silence, their faces lit by its glow. Every flash felt like a heartbeat, a call sent into the unknown. Daniel's voice was tight. "We should shut it down." Araya shook her head. "Too late. Once a signal begins, it cannot be unheard. Someone, or something, is already listening." Her words made Daniel's stomach turn. He stared at the device. The metal was ancient, scarred by time. It's still alive with power. How could something so old still work? "We need answers," Daniel said finally. "We can't just run blind anymore." Araya studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Then let us learn. They entered deeper into the ruins. The air grew colder, heavy with dust and silence. Symbols glowed faintly along the walls, the same ones Daniel had seen before. They pulsed in rhythm with the beacon, as if connected. Daniel ran his fingers across the carvings. It's like a record, a message left behind. Araya stepped beside him, her silver eyes narrowing. Look closer. Together, they traced the images. They saw figures human and alien, fighting side by side. They battled monstrous creatures with glowing eyes, beasts that looked exactly like the hunters from the jungle. Daniel's chest tightened. This planet, Eta. It was a battlefield. Araya's voice was low. Not just a battlefield, a prison. These creatures were made here, weapons of war, left behind when their masters fell. The truth settled over them like a shadow. The hunters were not natural. They were born for killing, abandoned when the war ended, now ruling the jungle like predators without chains. Daniel whispered, and now we woke them up again. In the center of the chamber stood another crystal, larger than the one before. It glowed with pale blue light, stronger than the red beacon. Daniel touched it carefully. Images filled the air of projection, faint but clear. A voice echoed, speaking. In a language they did not know, but the meaning was clear in their minds. It was a warning. Araya's breath caught. It says, "The hunters cannot be killed, only contained. Their hive is endless." Daniel shook his head. There has to be a way. If people fought them before, they found something. The crystal pulsed again, showing a map of the planet. At the center, a dark pit glowed like fire. Around it, symbols of chains and warning. Signs. Araya's face grew grim. The hive, their source. That is where they were created. Daniel stared at it, fear twisting in his chest. Then that's where they're coming from now. A loud crack shook the ruins. Dust rained from the ceiling. The beacon flashed faster, like an alarm. Araya turned, her eyes sharp. They are coming. Daniel grabbed her arm. Wait, we can't just leave. We need to know how to stop them. Araya's voice was firm. The truth is clear. They cannot be stopped. Only delayed. Do you wish to die here, reading old stones? Daniel's jaw clenched. She was right. But his mind refused to give up. There had to be a way, something the ancients knew, something hidden in these walls. Before he could argue, a roar split the air. The sound came from above, shaking the ruins. The hunters had found them. They ran through the dark corridors, their footsteps echoing. The glow of the crystal faded behind them as shadows closed in. The jungle outside was alive with movement, eyes glowing in every direction. Daniel gasped for air. There are too many. Araya's voice was steady, but her pace quickened. Then we do not fight here. We run. They sprinted back toward the wreck, the roars chasing them like thunder. The ground trembled with every step, as if the planet itself was waking from a long sleep. By the time they reached the wreck, Daniel collapsed against the barricade, his lungs burning. Araya stood tall, though even she could not hide her exhaustion. The jungle around them glowed. With eyes, dozens, maybe hundreds. The hunters had gathered. Daniel's voice shook. They're everywhere. Araya's shard gleamed in her hand. The beacon called them. Now they come to finish what was left undone centuries ago. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. His engineer's mind screamed for a solution. The crystal had shown chains, containment, not destruction. If the ancients had trapped the hunters once, maybe they could do it again. We need to reach the hive, he said suddenly. Araya turned. Disbelief in her eyes. The hive, that is suicide. No, Daniel said firmly. His fear burned into determination. It's the source. If we don't face it, they'll never stop coming. We'll never escape this planet alive. For a long moment, Araya said. Nothing. The hunters closed in, their growls echoing through the night. Finally, she gave a sharp nod. Then we go to the hive. And if we die fighting. The barricade rattled as the first of the hunters slammed against it. Metal bent, wires snapped. The survivors stood side by side, their weapons ready. Daniel's voice was steady now. We head for the hive tomorrow. No more running. No more. Hiding Araya's silver eyes glowed in the moonlight. Agreed. The barricade cracked, the jungle roared, and the night filled with the sound of monsters closing in. The truth was clear. This was not just a fight for survival. It was a war that had been waiting for centuries, and now it had begun again. Final choice. The night did not end. It stretched on like an endless trial, filled with roars, claws, and glowing eyes. Daniel and Araya fought through it, standing back to back. Inside the wreckage, their barricade breaking piece by piece. Every trap Daniel had built snapped. Every shard of metal cut flesh. But still, the hunters came. When the dawn finally rose, the ground was littered with broken bodies of beasts. Smoke and blood filled the air. Daniel leaned against a shattered panel, his arms trembling, his clothes torn. His breath came in sharp gasps, but he was alive. Araya stood near him, her shard dripping with black blood. She was wounded, a deep cut across her arm, but her face showed no pain. She looked at Daniel, her silver eyes shining with something he had not seen before. Respect. You fought well, she said. Daniel gave a weak laugh. I fought because you kept me alive long enough to try. For the first time, she smiled faintly. Not mockery, not pride. Just real, human-like warmth. But their moment was short. A new roar rose in the distance. Louder, deeper. The ground shook. Araya's face hardened. The hive has awakened. They began their journey at first light. The ruins had shown the map, and Daniel had memorized it. The hive was at the heart of the jungle, inside a pit where smoke rose from the ground like fire. The path was dangerous. Hunters followed them, always at the edges of sight, but none attacked. It was as if they were being guided, herded toward the heart. Daniel whispered, "They're letting us go." Araya nodded grimly. The hive wants us. It calls us. Ours. Passed until they reached it. A massive crater filled with smoke and heat. At its center stood a black structure, pulsing like a beating heart. Around it, hundreds of hunters moved in circles, their glowing eyes fixed on the pit. Daniel's breath caught. This is it. This is where they were made. Araya's voice was steady, and this is where we end. They crept down the slope, using smoke as cover. Daniel carried a small reactor core strapped to his back, the last dangerous piece from their wreck. If overloaded, it could create a blast strong enough to destroy the hive or at least bury it. But the risk was clear. Once activated, there would be no escape. Daniel looked at Araya. If this works, the hive dies. But so do we. Araya's eyes locked on his. Then we choose. Escape alone or fight together. For a moment, the air between them was heavy with silence. Daniel thought of Earth, of oceans and blue skies he might never see again. He thought of the war that had divided them, of the hatred that had brought humans and her kind into endless battles. And he thought of her, this alien warrior who had stood beside him, saved him, trusted him. He gave a slow nod. We finish this together. Araya's lips curved in the smallest smile. At last, human, you speak like a warrior. They moved closer to the black heart of the hive. The ground shook with each pulse. Strange whispers filled the air, crawling into their minds, promising death, promising fear. Daniel's head spun, but he forced his focus on the reactor. He knelt, his hands working quickly, connecting wires, setting overload commands. His engineer's mind moved faster than his fear. Araya stood above him, shard ready, cutting down any beast that crept too close. She fought like fire, her body moving with deadly grace. Daniel's voice was tight. Almost done. A roar split the sky. From the center of the hive, the great beast rose. Taller than the trees, covered in black armor. Its eyes burned with fire. This was no hunter, was the hive master. Daniel's hands shook. We can't fight that. Araya's stance did not break. Then we don't. We hold it back until your machine is ready. The beast charged, shaking the ground. Araya leaped forward, striking its legs, drawing its attention. It roared and swung, claws tearing the earth apart. Daniel worked faster, his heart racing, his mind screaming. Just a little longer. He shouted. Araya fought like a storm. She climbed its back, driving her shard deep into its flesh. The creature screamed, spinning wildly, trying to throw her off. She held on, blood covering her hands, her face lit with fierce determination. Finally, Daniel slammed the last wire into place. The reactor screamed, glowing brighter than the sun. It's done, he shouted. Run. Araya looked back at Treya. Araya looked back at him. The beast shook beneath her. She could escape now, leave him. Leave the blast, but she did not move. Instead, she leaped from the beast and landed beside him. Her voice was calm. We finish this together. Daniel's throat tightened. He nodded. The hive master roared and charged. Daniel and Araya stood side by side, the reactor glowing between them. The explosion came like the end of the world. Light swallowed the jungle. Fire consumed the pit. The roar of the hive master turned to silence as the ground collapsed, burying the hive, the beasts, and the two unlikely allies. When the smoke cleared, the jungle was quiet for the first time. No glowing eyes, no roars. Only silenced above the pit, the stars shone brighter. Perhaps no one would ever know their story, a human engineer and a female alien. Enemies by war, united by survival. But their sacrifice would echo across the stars. The hive was gone. The hunters were no more. In the end, they did not die as enemies. They died as one.